Patty's Aquatics. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae. Now, I have a past video out about it, which I'll link up here. And in that video, I got rid of it very fast and easy, but I used medication. And that's something I want to do differently in this video and this time around with it. I want to try to beat it without using medications. Now, medications work very easily and good. They wipe it out within days, but at what cost? And that's kind of why I want to steer away from it if I have to. It says that it doesn't kill your good bacteria within your aquariums, but it's an antibacterial medicine, so it's going to be killing bacteria within your aquarium whether you like it or not. Now, I've never suffered from any crashes in my cycle within my aquariums when I've used it in the past, but that being said, I really want to try to do it as natural as possible. So that being said, how do you beat cyanobacteria then if you're not going to use medication? Well, to say you're going to beat it, it's kind of hard because in actuality, cyanobacteria is over 2.5 billion years old. That's right, you heard me right, 2.5 billion years old. So this is an old organism that's been around since the beginning of time. So really there is no beating it, but the best way to try to get rid of it is to understand it. And that's what this video more is going to be about, is trying to respect it and try to understand what causes it and what kind of can take it away. And I think that's what causes a lot of confusion for hobbyists as well, including myself. When I went to go try to find out why I was getting the cyanobacteria, now if you go and Google it, how to get rid of cyanobacteria, you're going to get a long list of different symptoms of what causes it. Now, what are those? You're going to be like high nitrates, low nitrates, high phosphates, not enough flow, too much organic material, not maintaining your tank enough. Now, are any of these symptoms incorrect? Maybe not. They all could be correct. You know, every tank is different, and that's another point of it. Not only do you need to understand cyanobacteria and what causes it, but you also need to understand your tank. Every tank is different, and every situation within everybody's tanks are different. So what may cause cyanobacteria in one tank may be different to another tank. So that's all about understanding not only our tanks, but cyanobacteria. So if you go back to one of my old videos, my dirted filterless fish room update, which I'll link up here, I showed that cyanobacteria came back, and that was 5 weeks ago. Now, what I did was I buried that cyanobacteria into the substrate that was lying all on top of my sand. I pushed it back down into it, and then I put some leaves over the top of it. Now, in that old cyanobacteria video that I linked earlier, I mentioned that in the comments, someone told me that they put leaves over the top of their cyanobacteria and it helped get rid of it for them. So I tried that. But in this video, I also show that algae, hair algae, that is starting to consume my plants on the top part of the water. Now, I don't know necessarily if this is cyanobacteria, but it's hairy. It looks like hair algae, but it's very slimy and it's got odor like cyanobacteria. Now, I know there are many different strains of cyanobacteria, so this very well could be a strain. I'm not 100% sure if it is cyanobacteria, but I'm going to go with the notion that it is and try to beat it the same as the cyanobacteria that is on my substrate. And that's what I found out in week 1, and that's going to lead us into week 2. Well, this is 1 week after that update video where I buried that cyanobacteria and covered it with leaves and removed this algae up on the plants up here. And as you can see, it has come back and engulfed these plants up here. Now, some other reasons why cyanobacteria can occur in your aquarium from what I read is if you overfeed your tanks. Now, I can see that because of a lot of the dry foods are very high in phosphates. But that's not the case in this aquarium. I have about 6 guppy endler fish in here, and I've never fed them once since they've been in here. They feed off the scraps of my puffer fish or off the food web inhabitants. Now, as far as my puffer, all I feed him are frozen raw shrimp, frozen clam in the half shell, and then I sprinkle in some live snails here and there, and they kind of feed off of that. So overfeeding is not the case in this tank. But I did do some testing. Now, I'm not a big advocate in just testing your tanks for no reason, because there are so many different elements that are not included on these test kits to really tell you what's going on. But for me in this situation, there was a few of them I wanted to pinpoint on, and I needed a test for that. Now, ammonia and nitrites were at 0 like I thought, and my nitrates are very low like normal. They're at 5 parts per million. But I also tested for phosphates, and that's what I wanted to look at very closely. I have a phosphate test kit that I pulled out, and I did some testing, and I was at 2 parts per million. Now, I don't know what the actual number of phosphates your planted tank should be at, but when I Googled it, it said anywhere from 0.1 to 1. So if that is the case, and we're going to shoot for, I'm at 2 parts per million, that means I'm pretty much double of what I should have, which could be a leading cause to what's going on in my tank. Now, if I'm not overfeeding, where are those phosphates coming from? My guess is it's from the overabundance of organic material from my resurrection jars and my food web that's in my aquarium. Now, I'm not going to remove them because I want to keep that in there, but how do I get rid of those phosphates? Well, one of the things that I did think of is I bought from Aquarium Co-op some years ago, when I bought those phosphate kits, test kits, phosphate remover pads. Now, I never used them because I didn't need it, but I thought this is an ideal situation to try to take this out and give it a try. So what I did is I cut a square off of that phosphate remover pad, and since I don't use filtration, I punched a hole through it and tied an airline around it and put it right in front of my wave maker. That way water can pass through it and around it, and we'll see if this will take away some of the phosphates. So we'll keep an eye on it over the weeks, but we'll see. And then what I'm going to do yet for this week is I'm going to try to pull as much of that algae off those plants as I can. And then I'm going to take a net and try to strain out as much of that cyanobacteria that's on the surface of my substrate there. Then I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Well, I got as much of it off the plants as I can. The stuff sticks to it exactly like a bad algae, but I got a lot of it off, and then I took a net and I just strained the bottom of the substrate and got as much of that out of there as I can. So we'll sit back and see what happens. Well, this is actually the next day after I cleaned all that, and you can see the cyanobacteria is already popping back up into the substrate, which is happening pretty fast. But there's something more I want to show. It's hard to see with the glare, but if you look, I have cyanobacteria deeper into the substrate of my aquarium here. Now, I watched a video of this recently from Alex from Fishery, and highly recommend you check out his channel, by the way. But he explains in one of his videos that it's actually okay to have cyanobacteria deep in your substrate. You just don't want it to creep up into your water column. And I had just cleaned all of this algae up to that substrate level yesterday, and you can see it's already starting to work its way back a bit. Now, that's not a good thing, obviously, so I want to try to stop that, and I have something in mind. But you can see here, I do have a little bit of it on the surface here, but not very much, and it doesn't go very deep. So I think that's just from being infiltrated from the actual surface itself. But what's happening, in my opinion, is it's so bright from my light here, from my pond light, that's helping feed that cyanobacteria because it does like light and it uses photosynthesis for that. So what I'm going to do is try to cover this, and hopefully that'll help stop the spread of it on that side of the tank. So what I did was I found this padding with an adhesive backing. I don't even know really what it was for. I think it was for some air conditioner I had in the past, and I just covered it with that. So it's going to block the light from that pond light over there and only get light potentially from the aquarium. But we'll see if that can kind of subside it and stop it and slow that down. All right, so it is 1 week later since we installed that phosphate remover pad, and about 6 days since I showed you that this cyano already showed back up on the substrate after I moved it the next day. But you can see that it is not spread really. It still kind of stayed centralized in this area that it was. It's gotten a little darker since then, but it hasn't spread. So that's good. But all this algae on these plants, that has gone gangbusters and gotten a little out of control. I even removed some of it during the middle of the week and it's still come back thick. Now, I'm still a little perplexed on this algae itself. You can see it looks exactly like hair algae. Maybe it is. It sticks to the plants. I can get clumps of it off, but like I said, it's very slimy. It reminds me of a lot of cyanobacteria, except it doesn't look like it. I see a little clump possibly in there of cyano started. So who knows? But what do I got planned for today? Today is going to be doing some testing. I want to test the phosphate levels to see if that little cutout of pad I had up there has done anything. And then two, while I'm testing, I might as well just check for nitrates, nitrites, and ammonia for the heck of it to see where we're at, just to kind of get an overall look of really what's going on in this tank. So I just got done with the testing. Nitrates 0, nitrites 0, ammonia 0. That's all normal. I kind of figured that. Now the phosphates, they haven't moved at all. They're still at 2 parts per million. So what am I going to do about that? One, I don't know if that thing was doing anything. Maybe I need a bigger pad. So what I'll do today again is I'm going to remove some of this out of the substrate with my net and try to siphon it out of there, scrape some of the algae off the walls, and pull this out as much as I can, this algae off the plants. And then I think I'm going to do a water change. If that phosphate pad isn't cutting down that phosphates, doing a partial water change of maybe like 20 or 30% might help cut that down a little bit. So we'll try that today. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is try to net some of this cyano off of here. I don't want to siphon it with a water hose while I do a little bit of a water change today, mainly because I do have the food web in here, and I really don't want to get any of that organism sucked out of here. I mean, this could take some of them out, but it would be a lot less than just taking the hose down there and just going nuts. So when I do a water change, which I'll explain later, my plan is just to take from the surface of the water, from the very top, and just take a little bit of water out there and do not disturb the substrate or even anywhere near the bottom of the tank. And by doing this right now with the net, I can still shake the sand out and only get that cyano, because that cyano kind of comes in clumps. If I didn't have a food web in here, I could take the siphon to it. It'd be a lot easier, but I do, so this is what I'm doing. Like I said here, I can pull this stuff off. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but it looks like string algae, but it is slimy. It smells like the normal stink of the tank, so I really don't know. If anyone out there has any ideas, please share. Now I could trim some of these plants, but it's just going to start to create it on the new trim, so I would rather just let it go here and keep pulling it until I figure this out. All right, so I did that water change. Like I said, I did about 20 to 25%. I did change that phosphate pad out, and I put a little bit of a bigger one. I doubled it in size. I don't know if it's really doing anything. We'll give it another week and we'll see. Got as much as that off as the algae off those plants as I could get, and as much out of the substrate as I could by hand. Like I said, one more week, we'll see what happens. And I did turn my water temperature down a little bit because I did read that cyanobacteria really likes warm water. I had it set at 80, so it wasn't tremendously high. I dumped it down to 75, which would probably be the lowest area I would want to go for my puffer there. And we'll see if that makes a difference over the week. Let's take it week by week. So if this doesn't work out, then we'll try something different. All right, this is week 3 of algae mania. So as you can see, the cyanobacteria, it really hasn't advanced. I actually noticed that this week it really didn't grow more, it actually looks a little less. So I kind of think I'm starting to get away from that, but the algae in my plants is going strong. I already cleaned some of the algae out of there in the middle of the week, and it is growing back fierce yet. Now, I just did some water tests. Like I knew, nitrates, nitrites, and ammonia is all at 0. So those nitrates are very low. But I tested phosphates, and they were at 2.0, 2 parts per million. They are now down to 1 part per million. So that phosphate remover pad is helping, or it could be the combination of the water changes. But today what I'm going to do, once again, clean this off the substrate, pull out as much of that algae as I can off the plants. I was half tempted to start to trim them down, but since I've seen those phosphates are lowered, I want to try something else. So I'm going to do a water change again, about 20 or 30% again, to help clean up as much of this algae as I can. And then what I'm going to do is I'd like to add some nitrates to this, since the nitrates are very low. And that's another thing I've seen with the cyanobacteria, is thriving on very low nitrate levels. Well, I don't have nitrates available to me other than in fertilizer form. So I haven't used fertilizer in my tanks in probably almost a year. So what I'm going to do is do this water change, clean this up, and I'm going to dose a big dose of Corium Co-op's Easy Green to try to get some nitrate in there. And we'll see if that makes any difference at all this week. All right. Algae mania has been kind of trimmed down some now. I took the net like I did last time and kind of siphoned out everything from the bottom. Then I took my hands, took as much out as I could from those plants. And then I took my siphon and took the top of the plants and sucked up as much as I could from the top of the water, and did about a 30% water change. And then I added, like I said I was going to, the Corium Co-op Easy Green to try to introduce some nitrogen to get some nitrate into this tank, since I'm sitting at 0 again for 2 weeks. Everything I read and had some discussions that really this blue-green algae thrives off of low nitrates and high phosphates, which is exactly going on in my tank. So now that the phosphates have come down, I'm going to try to bump those nitrates up a little bit with this Easy Green. Now I know there is a little bit of phosphate in that Easy Green as well, so I'm kind of hoping it balances out. I hit it with 10 pumps, which would be enough for 100 gallons. We'll see what happens this week, see if it does anything. If it does, we'll continue. If it doesn't, well, then we'll take another path. The other thing I did do this week is I turned my light intensity down from 60% down to 50. And then I also think I'm going to cut the lighting. I go 10 hours a day with my lights. I think I'm going to cut it down to 8 to start with, and we'll see what happens from there. And then we'll see, like I said, we'll see what happens this week. I'm hoping we're on the verge of getting some turnover here, because like I said, the stuff on that substrate was starting to not go away, but it definitely was not advancing anymore and not getting as dark and thick. But I did find stuff on the leaves of the plants that was definitely cyano. And then, like I said, that stuff in the plants itself that looks like hair algae, I think it's really a mixture of the two. I really don't know how that works, but I don't know how else to explain it. Either way, we'll be back for week 4 of hopefully no more of algae mania. All right, so this is week 4. It's been 1 month since the cyanobacteria showed back up in my aquarium. And as you can see, it is pretty much all gone from the substrate. It has not come back at all. Now, the algae itself within the aquarium and the plants, it's still there, but it has been cut back. I haven't removed any of it at all during the week. So that is good. Now, what has changed? Well, obviously from the very beginning, I wound up cutting the lights down to 50% from 60% intensity. I cut the lighting hours back last week from 10 hours to 8 hours. And then also I added a little bit of guppy grass in here. And then I started using that fertilizer last week as well. I think that on top of that phosphate removing pad has kind of been helping. So now I just did water testing and my nitrates and nitrates are still at 0, but my phosphates have cut down to 0.5 parts per million. So only half a part per million now compared to the 2 that it was. So we are on the right track. We're figuring out, it seems like, that lowering that phosphates is definitely a big trigger for the cyanobacteria. And if there's a way to kind of up that nitrates, it probably would help. So I did dose more fertilizer in the middle of the week. Still not showing anything in the testing. But like I said, this algae is starting to dissipate. So what we're going to do today is the same as the past weeks. I'm going to remove as much of this algae as I can. But this week, there's nothing to take off the substrate. So perfect, good sign. And I noticed in the back as well, it's hard to see, but there's not a lot of algae on that back wall anymore either. That's starting to be going away. So I'm very pleasantly surprised. I might trim the plants a little bit, but I'll have to see what they look like after I can get as much of this algae off as I can. All right, so that maintenance is done. Did a water change again, about 20%. I feel like the water changing method with trying to get this algae out of here works best for me. I can put the siphon hose right over the top of the plants as I try to pull it off and it gets sucked right back up. I still get all these little particulates that float all around, but it kind of cuts back on that. Otherwise, there'd be a heck of a lot more and I would have to vacuum more at the bottom to try to get that off, which I don't want to do. I trimmed a few of the plants at the very top that were very thick and just full with that algae. And let's see, other than that, it's about it for then today. I will dose some more fertilizer because I really want to try to get that nitrates to come up a little bit to counteract that phosphate. I just got to be careful because I don't want to get the nitrates too high to a point where I grow algae more than besides what I have. But I really don't think that is a concern considering I can't even get nitrates to register. So other than that, we'll sit back and we'll see what happens again in week 5. And there's Puff Daddy trying to find some snails on that guppy grass that might have come in the other day. He's always looking for snails. All right, this is week 5. And this is where we're going to wrap up this video. The cyanobacteria has not come back on the substrate. I have not touched the algae on these plants all week. There's still some there, but it's going away. So I did testing as well. Phosphates still sitting at 0.5 parts per million. Nitrates sitting at 5 parts per million. And of course, nitrites and ammonia 0. I did put the wave maker on a timer to maybe cut back on the possible hair algae part of this. I did find by cutting the air out of my aquariums, the hair algae has been cutting back. So I'm thinking maybe that'll be the same in here. But other than that, that is what I did to naturally beat cyanobacteria. Well, that's how I stopped cyanobacteria from overtaking my aquarium. Now, I know this was an extra long video, so if you're still watching, thank you very much. I appreciate it, but I really knew no other way than to show everything I did without cutting things out. So that being said, I really want to say that cyanobacteria truly is something that you must understand to really try to get rid of it within your aquarium. And really, it's the one perfect Mother Nature way to tell you that you have something imbalanced in your aquarium. So take that as you will. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope maybe you learned something with me with it. And if you liked it, please consider hitting that subscribe button. But always remember to think outside that box and take a step back into nature. And I hope to see you next time here at Patty's Aquatics.